It's often been said that it's hard to say a bad word about New Zealand and New Zealanders. That is, unless you're Australian.
New Zealand fundamentally sucks.
We need a wall built between Australia and New Zealand.
Look at it. It looks like a dog turd we're about to step on. It's so small.
Who ever heard of an aspirational New Zealander, you know?
An underarm. We haven't believed it.
But I thought Flossie the sheep won Miss New Zealand every year.
New Zealand is Australia's little brother. We love you because you're family, but also we hate you.
Hey bro, do you want to go get some fish and chop?
Fish and chop.
Fish and chops?
Fish and chops.
Donkey!
Ever since New Zealand turned down the offer to become part of the Australian Federation, they've been out to mock our way of life, our sports teams, our accent.
That's beach days, bro. Beach days. We really like our cricket here, beach, yeah.
But despite all this, New Zealanders still seem to love Australia. We've been moving over there in droves for years. Last year alone, almost 50,000 Kiwis moved to Australia. Conversely, slightly less Australians moved over here. I mean, back in the day, you didn't even need a passport to get into Australia if you were from New Zealand. Kiwis could just rock up to customs and immigration in Australia. The officer would be all like, what's the purpose of your visit here in Australia, mate? And you could be all like, I live here now. Yeah, right, off you go. And the same was true for Aussies wanting to move to New Zealand too. It's just that historically a lot less Australians have packed up to call New Zealand home than the number of Kiwis who've settled in Oz. But that's always going to be the case really, especially when one of the two countries is much larger, has a lot more jobs, opportunities, etc, etc. So with New Zealanders being the fourth largest overseas born community in Australia, there's over 500,000 Kiwis in Australia now. And making up 7% of the country's population, what do Aussies actually think of Kiwis? Well, for the most part, they go pretty much unnoticed by Australians really, but every now and then some choice stereotypes do pop up. The Bondi Bludger. The myth of the lazy, unemployed Kiwi going straight from the plane to the dole queue and then to Bondi Beach is perhaps one of the oldest and most well-known stereotypes of New Zealanders held by Australians. As I mentioned previously, it was once very easy for Aussies and Kiwis to work, travel, and live between the two countries, even easier than it is now. So easy, in fact, that for the longest time, Kiwis living in Australia who'd fallen on hard times could just apply for the unemployment benefit there, just like their Aussie counterparts. Long story short, there were probably a few unemployed dropkicks from New Zealand who took advantage of this, rocked up to Oz just to collect the dole, and as the saying goes, a few bad apples always spoil the bunch. So it didn't take long for the stereotype of the Kiwi Bondi Bludger to take hold in the minds of mostly very conservative Australians. The legend of the lazy Kiwi living it up on the Australian taxpayer's dime, sprawled out across Bondi Beach, was so popular across Australia that in 1986, the Bob Hawke-led government imposed a 6-month waiting period on Kiwis who just arrived in Australia before they could collect unemployment benefits. That seems pretty fair to me, really. But much to the shock of the Australian government and all the Kiwi haters over there, it didn't stop Kiwis from coming to Australia at all. And that's because basically Kiwis come to Australia to work. And this fact confused a lot of Australians. Actually, throughout the 1980s and early 90s, the dole-bludging Kiwi stereotype was something a lot of Australian politicians and their supporters cling to, but at the same time, a lot of Aussies were complaining about New Zealanders in Australia for the opposite reason. These Kiwi taking the jobs. So, in the early 90s, according to some Australians, Kiwis were spectacularly dole-bludgers and taking Aussie jobs at the same time. I mean, double dipping's a good gig if you can get it, right? In 1992, Clyde Holding, an Australian Labor Party Member of Parliament, called for the Australian government to crack down on New Zealanders working in Australia and to scrap the free movement between the two countries that was formalised in 1973. Organisations like the Australian Workers' Union were complaining that almost half of Aussie sheep shearers were out of work because 40% of the country's sheep were being shorn by Kiwi shearers. Ha, sheep. And of course, if you ask most Aussies what they think of New Zealanders, it invariably resorts to sheep jokes very quickly. Common stereotype: they're sheep enthusiasts. Kiwis sheep. For a country with almost 3 times the number of sheep than people, Aussies love to break out the old sheep jokes whenever they meet a Kiwi. So, for the benefit of the Australians watching this video, and because it's due to the fact that we're merely mentioning New Zealand, here is a mandated number of sheep jokes just for you. Let's just get it out of the way, shall we? How does a New Zealander find a sheep in long grass? Rather enjoyable. I asked a New Zealander how many girlfriends he's had, but he fell asleep while counting them. A Kiwi's walking down the road with a sheep under each arm. As he's walking, he passes an Aussie. The Aussie sees the 2 sheep and says, "G'day, mate, you shearing?" To which the Kiwi replies, "Get your own, mate, I'm not sharing with anyone." And so on and so on. But, you know, it's not all negative. Do Australians have love for New Zealanders?
Do Australians feel love? Are they capable of love? Do they even know what we're speaking of?
Well, it turns out they do. For the most part, the negative stereotypes of New Zealanders are only held by a small minority, really. All of the evidence I could find of Aussies being asked what they think of New Zealand was actually overwhelmingly positive and nice.
The people are really nice.
You know, it's a real beautiful country. Nice people, I suppose. Well, you know, I think the people, I think the accent, I think the ability for Australians to go over there and instantly become about 2 points out of 10 more attractive.
The consensus among Aussies seems to be that we're quite nice, friendly, even when we're protesting.
Did you see the New Zealand protests? I think we can say, just off this video alone, and in general, to Americans, New Zealand is like our Canada in the sense that they're so nice.
Yes.
Just lovely people.
Yeah.
New Zealand, they're going hard. They're like, we want freedom or whatever, right?
Yeah.
They're protesting. The front row of protesters knock down a gate. These people look at each other and they go, oh, goodness. 4 people pick up the fence and put it back. And they're just like, oh, thank God for that.
That's a bit much, isn't it?
That got a bit out of hand.
We're easy to hang out or work with, we're a bit more laid back than Aussies, and have better meat pies. And according to one Redditor who's lived in both countries and listed out an interesting comparison of things in Australia and New Zealand, they claim that New Zealand wins when it comes to work life, coffee, crime rate, booze, pies, but interestingly, not cheese. What's going on there? Some pretty interesting claims. What do you make of them? Well, at the end of the day, Aussies and Kiwis have far more in common than not, and what to outsiders might seem mean, nasty, is actually just banter. The relationship between Australia and New Zealand is a bit like a sibling rivalry. Sure, you'll lock your little brother in the washing machine till he starts crying for a bit of fun, but he's still your brother, and if anyone else tries to pull a stunt on him like that, you'll go over and smash them. Aussies like to have a dig at us, and we like to give it back to them as well. And if you want to know more about how New Zealand compares to Australia, or just see Australia getting roasted for that matter, then check out these videos.